So we're going to get started. As you guys know, we try to start promptly, but I also recognize people's schedules are a little crazy these days. So I want to make sure we give people plenty of time. For those of you who do not know who I am Catherine Haskins. I'm one of the founders of the Bridge Club. We are purposely bringing everyone together for networking and connections within the profession. And tonight's topic is so timely and so very much needed as we go through. And we're going to need you to also engage with each one of us using the chat function. You all can mute yourself or unmute yourself. We will have opportunities for people to engage. And so I'm really excited tonight that we have Royal Canin came forth and had challenged us with how could we really help the profession during everything that's been happening with COVID. And I said, I think that there would be a great opportunity to bring amazing folks in leadership together to really address the leadership challenges, both on the practice side as well as the industry side. And so I can't even tell you how thrilled I am and excited to be able to have three amazing individuals. If you've not known who they are before this, you will after, and at least now you know their names on their screen as well. But we have Dr. Brent Mayabb, if you could shave, there you go. He is the Chief Medical Officer for Royal Canin. Woohoo, big job. Pretty impressive. We have Dr. Apryl Horbal, who is also the president of VETNOW. Where's she at? There she is, waving away. And what I want to be able to say is that she is an entrepreneur. So for those of you who are in the entrepreneurial space, this is really great insight that you're going to be receiving. I should also indicate Brent is also a relief vet. So we're going to be talking through that perspective as well. And then, as many of you do know, within the Bridge Club, we are huge advocates for the entire medical team. So when I was offered the opportunity to be able to bring in Adrian and he said yes, my brain just about exploded, because I am so excited to show what technicians can be doing in this profession and how they can really elevate and really do more. And Adrian Ford has done exactly that. He is the regional VP for operations for the central region, because everyone's got their regions, with BluePearl. So I have to honestly say he's our very first BluePearl person we've ever had speak at the Bridge Club. So I am like really excited, but I'm more excited that he is representing veterinary technicians and nurses throughout the profession. And so that is awesome sauce. So with that, one piece of advice before we all raise our glasses: please turn on your camera if you can. I know there's one of you for sure who is driving, so that is not something that I want you turning on your camera when you're driving. But if you'll also check in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there are three little dots. And one of the things that the Bridge Club is really committed to doing is networking. So if you would put your first name, you do not have to put your last name if you are not comfortable, comma, the company that you work with or represent, or the name of your practice. We really want to make sure that people have the opportunity to really connect and engage here. So with that, we all know it's time to raise our glass. I'm going to turn it over to Adrian for our opening toast.
I want to make a toast to all the frontline managers out there who support all the essential workers. We know that people do a lot of drive-by cheering for our nurses, our doctors, but there's that special group of people who are there to take care of them every day. And I want to raise a glass to them and grateful acknowledgement. Cheers, everybody.
That is awesome. Yeah. So I'm going to give you guys, before we get started, I want to give you of the insight here. Do you feel that leadership has evolved, devolved, or remained the same? Yell out what you think the highest percentage was of those three.
Evolved.
So I will tell you, evolved at 84%, remained the same, 6%, and devolved 12%. Interesting insight there. How would you rate your own leadership skills? So within this group of folks that are with us right now, we have 0% is high. So I think we all have an opportunity to really learn here. So that's good news. Adaptive, I love that. I really love the adaptive, 76%, reactionary, 24%, and absolutely no one said low and no one said barely surviving. So I think that that is really good insight for us to, kind of look at as we're going to dive into this conversation. And so I would love to get each one of your opinions very specifically Were you surprised by those evolve, devolve, or stay the same? And let's start, since you gave us the toast, Adrian, let's start with you.
I am not surprised at all because we've really had to evolve. In some ways, coronavirus has advanced this video format, this video meeting by 5 years. So in some ways, I got 2 days of work back. So I'm able to connect with teams all across the country. And actually, like in some ways, it's better than others. I think for a lot of people in our hospital, it's really frustrated our abilities to connect with clients. But we've also been able to sort of experience each other in new ways where we didn't get to before. So you get to see people in a new humanity. You know, I'm meeting with attorneys when their kids run into the room. One of my practice managers, he has an adult son with special needs, and we'll be in the middle of a meeting with senior leaders, and his son will walk in and give him a hug in the middle of a meeting, and that's okay. And we're getting to see each other in a way that we never really did before. So I totally see the evolve piece.
So I'm going to ask Brent, from his being put on his, relief vet hat, just knowing that, how would you say we are doing? Evolving, devolving, or we've stayed the same just as a veterinarian in practice?
From what I see in when I do relief, which I haven't done as much relief this year as I would normally do, weirdly, through this. I haven't gotten, as many calls, but, I would say it's definitely different. We're on the change curve, and we're pretty early on the change curve. So I think there's still a lot of like, well, this isn't as good as it used to be. But I was thinking about an analogy, and this isn't the best, but it's off the cuff, so it's the best I can do. When we started texting, nobody had phones built for texting. And so if you wanted to text the letter C, you press the number 2 3 times. So it's super inefficient. And it's like, why wouldn't I just call someone? But then technology caught up, to Adrian's point, and there were Blackberries, and then there were iPhones, and then, we are where we are today. And I think although this is doable, what we're doing in terms of connection, I wonder where technology is going to allow us to bring that level of connection up. And so, that's one of the things that I'm seeing. And I think in practice, the way that will apply is how we, sort of interact with our clients in a much more technology forward way. And luckily we have, multiple experts on the line about this, but I'm thinking specifically of Apryl on this.
So that does bring us to you, Apryl. You're on the cutting edge of what is happening in the profession. We're also very fortunate to have Allie McIntyre with the VVCA with us this evening too. But let's literally talk about the evolve, devolve, or stay the same, specifically when it comes to what you do, telehealth. I mean, so in the world, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think evolving still is definitely a really good way to put it, because certainly if you look at what we expected to happen in March and April when all this began, I think we're in a very different place than what we thought in terms of telehealth. And I think you can see that in veterinary and in human medicine, that of course the awareness of it's been raised. Of course, people are more willing to incorporate it in their practices, but people are still really kind of evolving in the way they respond to these changing technologies. It was kind of thrust upon them whether they were ready or not. And so I think that kind of that natural fight, that natural resistance to change is still causing some friction, essentially. And so, leading people through that change is, I think, a bigger challenge than maybe just tackling COVID itself. But this forced change in how we do things is really what we're leading people through.
So my gosh, it's like you have to run a show or something and you know where we're going with the next question, because I think what's really interesting here is I want to be able to break out this conversation into 2 pillars if we can. If we can talk about the veterinary practice and the impacts of COVID, this massive change that we've all been impacted by, and then talk about the industry, because we do have several consultants also on the call today, or that will be viewing this separately. And I really want to make sure that they're getting insight from exactly what they can be doing and enhancing their own leadership. So let's first talk about the practices themselves. And I do have some practice owners involved in this, so I would love for them to chime in on the chat if they can. But I really would like to see how leadership has changed on the front lines. And I'm going to start with Adrian on this one in particular, because he oversees so many practices. But we know in general that practice owners and managers every day were being faced with new threats, whether it is new policies that or procedures that were being set forth by the state itself and the politicians, if you will, and what was actually medically being provided. We know there was a lot of lack of guidance. I think Dr. Cheryl can jump in on some of the challenges associated with that. If you have an employee that tests positive, what do you do? The fact that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, 11.2 million pets entered the marketplace, and we were overwhelmed with new pets coming into practice. So what has changed? What is going to stay? And what did we get rid of that was ugly? So I really would love. So Adrian, that's a big question. You get to go first.
I think to me, what's really stood out from a leadership perspective this year is those who could lead with strategic agility, those who could change, manage, thrived, and those who couldn't manage through the change really struggled. And all of our qualities, everything good about us, everything bad about us, came with us into the coronavirus era. And if you think about it, in a pretty short period of time, I had about 2 weeks where we had to develop associate safety measures. We changed the workflow in the hospitals. We had to communicate that. We changed how we interacted with clients, how we took deposits. All of those things changed in about a 2-week period. In my practices, we had that fully rolled out before March 13th when President Trump declared a national emergency. And so being in front of that and communicating that made all the difference in the world. And we saw those leaders who could manage through that change have thrived, and they've built stronger connection with those teams. And those who struggled with managing that change are still behind and still trying to dig out of it.
And I think, Apryl, you made a comment about how crazy things have gotten, that everyone's kind of heads are down and trying to basically, again, back to our survey, how's your leadership style? No one indicated just trying to survive. But I think by a raise of hands, I think we could all say that we've all legitimately just tried to survive as we've been going through this. But you actually had a unique perspective on, and the word there, I actually leaked it out, perspective. Let's talk a little bit about that and what practices can be gaining from that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, first of all, I think we can all acknowledge that the people participating in this group are maybe a different subset than maybe the general population, right? We all are taking time to improve ourselves, to gain perspective in the industry and gain perspective in practice. And I don't think that the most of the practice owners, most of the practitioners out there are really doing that. That idea of gaining perspective to incorporate new ways of doing things into practice, to become more efficient, to leverage new resources that are out there, and to really take into consideration all of the options available to them through curbside appointments, telemedicine, things like that. They're just head down trying to survive most of the time. And so, encouraging our colleagues and encouraging people in the profession to take a step back and take a few minutes to evaluate all of their options is really key, I think, right now. I don't think enough people are gaining perspective about what they can do outside their norm. They are head down trying to survive for the most part right now.
So I'm going to pivot just 1 second because I know Marty is on the call, and Marty, I'm going to ask yourself to unmute because I do want to talk a little bit. Adrian mentioned the strategic agility. Apryl mentioned the idea of really providing perspective. You did something in your practice that I think is so incredibly profound that you told me about today. Can you share what you started in June or July and what is going to happen?
Sure. So 12 years ago, we built the building that we're currently practicing in. We built a garage between the main building and the staff building. And about 6 years after that, so about 6 years ago, I was at a VMG meeting listening to Owen McCafferty talk about overbuilding of veterinary hospitals. And it occurred to me that a drive-through veterinary clinic that was merely wellness would be a really good idea. So I went forth, talked to my husband, sat him down and explained to him what I wanted to do, found a patent attorney and patented the idea of a drive-through. We started construction in June, and we will be opening in January for a 4-bay, 2-door garage, two doors per bay garage, where wellness services will be offered for clients, either in their vehicle, in the garage bay, or in an associated exam room, so that there's a level of safety and a level of communication that doesn't currently exist in the standard veterinary floor plan of a hospital.
So first of all, if
I
everyone
need to chime in, hang on. I need to chime in and just say that is brilliant, because in our practice, you know, we're curbside right now, of course, but there are on occasion where we need to go out to the car, and, you know, going out, and now it's cold and it's going to start snowing, and how safe is that? Not, you know, and the animals can run away. And so that is just brilliant. And if I had the space, I would want to get in on it right now.
So what I was going to say is everyone picks their jaw off of the floor for what you've been able to accomplish. The fact that this had been in her plan, how long was this in your plan, Marty? You said this was over in your plan 6 years ago?
Yes.
So 6 years ago, but you then dusted it
Yeah.
off.
So this. Well, no, it's been underway. I purchased the property 3 years ago, and we worked with an architect for a while, and then he moved to Australia, and then we found another architect, and then our builder finally got things going. So there's been a long process to get this all happening, but we're building it with the expectation of being able to franchise this. So we have been working with the architect and the builder to basically make this replicable, duplicatable in any climate, anywhere across the country. We're in Wisconsin. So, you know, we deal with snow falling off the cars and ice and cold and all those weather elements. Whereas, you know, if you're in Florida or Arizona, you have to deal with heat. But we are expecting to make this something that could be duplicated in other climates in other parts of the country.
And I love that. And I really wanted her to share it, because it really is, you know, taking something and making it, and it's very relevant right now more than ever before. But Brent, I do want your point of view on this. And it's really important when we talk about the practices and we talk about leadership of what is all happening, because I think what you have to share is really critically important more than ever before. What are we seeing?
You know, this is a great example of, you know, the good leadership that's coming through here with what Marty said. I mean, it's figuring it out, whatever it may be. There's a lot of it's right now to figure out, but you know, when curbside started, there's no playbook. And so people figured it out. And, you know, I've heard things about really, you know, owners who are closing down 1 day a week to give their teams rest because they're thinking about the long game. You know, that's good leadership, I think. I've heard, you know, or I've seen technicians sort of redesign workflow within the clinic to fit the situation now, just stepping up and doing it. I mean, that's good leadership. But with a lot of this stuff comes a lot of stress, and everybody's running on the ragged edge right now. And so for me, a piece of advice that I would give to leaders out there is just be empathetic with each other. There's a lot of stuff going on in the four walls of the clinic for everybody, but there's also a lot of stuff going on outside of those four walls. And, you know, as an example, if you know, a technician can't come in because something happened at her child's school, and you know, there's a positive, and now the child has to go home and she has to stay home, and then that makes it tough on everybody else who has to remain in the clinic because they're down a person. I mean, that's stressful, and a lot of times that's coming out in pretty hard ways. And so what I would just say is know that everybody's dealing with a lot of stuff. Some of it you see, some of it you don't. So just be empathetic.
I love that. Can we talk a little bit about the energy in the practice really fast, and the cosmic shift that has happened, and how do leaders, I'd love just one word from all of you if we can, how can leaders rally their troops that are on the front line, that are exhausted, absolutely exhausted, and that everything is changing? Is there something that a leadership skill or a tip that you would give to practitioners of what they might be able to do to help rally their teams? Let's go ahead. Since Brent, you talked first, I'm going to drive it to you, and you're probably like, oh man.
No, that's fine. I mean, I would say give people some rest. Like, I think that's so valuable right now. So if it's just one word, then rest.
Okay. What about you, Adrian?
I'm not sure it's one word, but I would say it's a long game. You know, we live in an industry where you can get through the 4th of July if you just keep your head down and you just kind of grind it out. And the truth is, we've been in this 4th of July. It's been the 4th of July for 8 months now in our teams, and they can't grind it out. They can't just they can't just push through it. So it's about changing your footing for the long game and making sure people are taking care of themselves in that we're pacing. In that for the first time in our industry, we're probably talking a lot more about what we're not going to do than what we want to do.
Ooh, what do you mean by that? Sorry, don't mean to like add on to it, but I am curious about what you mean by that.
You know, if you're in an emergency hospital in the middle of the night and there's a 7-hour wait, at some point you say, you know what? We used to say yes to everything. We'll take every itchy dog. We'll take every ear infection. We're going to do all those things. But to take care of the team and to pace ourselves and make sure we're focusing on the right things, we might say, you know what? I'm only going to see truly critical patients tonight. We're going to see the hit. I need to make sure that my team is fresh and ready to see the hit by car, the poison ingestion, those things that are time sensitive. And we might not be able to get to the itchy dog tonight. And that has to be okay.
And you know what? That's perfect because we have VETNOW here. So she would say, yes, use your telehealth, your virtual care provider. So gosh, it's like you guys know exactly what's happening here. But I would say, Apryl, what would be your one piece of advice for a practice?
I think really it's about giving your staff, your doctors, your techs, unconditional support. Because right now clients are stressed to the max as well, right? Their reactions are angry, frustrated, frequently. And so, instead of maybe where you would maybe have been a bit critical of your staff before, maybe, asked if they could have done something better, now is not the time to do that. They're already almost at the breaking point. Give them some unconditional support when they have a client, upset about something. I think we often at least leave the door open to ask questions. And I don't think we can really do that right now.
So I'd love for everybody to put into the chat your own one word that you would offer to the profession, because I think that this is really critically important for us all to be sharing. So do you have exactly a word or something to help motivate these staffs? Okay, Kurt, you just put in a whole thing. I can't click on it. What is it?
It's the old prioritization matrix.
Okay.
Urgent,
So prioritize would be your word.
urgent and important.
Yes. Yes. So please do feel free. Flexibility. I love it. I love it. And you know what I love of what Sarah just put in there? Allow people to feel. So I think that's important. They've got to be able to feel and express their emotion. I know we're talking about, when there's the wins as well as the losses as well. Oh, Nicole, that is brilliant. No. And it's okay. That's okay in this day and age. And so I love seeing that. I love the word support too. Oh, escalation. Ooh, Karen, interesting. Allow escalation. So Karen, can you unmute and give us a little thought on what you mean by that? Is Karen available to?
That it's not my own idea, just something that I've heard from some of our hospital leaders. And that's allowing, not having the technicians, assistants, and client service people be like responsible to the end of a client issue, letting them, so to speak, let them not be the end point of escalation, because these people are indeed at their breaking point. So allowing that escalation is in twofold. It's great because it lets them breathe, and it also gives the client a little bit bigger feeling of, oh, well, now I'm going to get somewhere, because they can say, oh, let me take this to my manager, or let me get you to somebody who can help you. So that's kind of what I meant.
I love that, Karen. And I thank you so much for sharing that, because I think it is important. I always say, and at least I'm on the industry side, which we'll transition to in a moment, but I always say, give people a safety net. always give some people a place where they can fall so they can go as far as they can. And if they need support, they've got it. So I love that. Giving people to know that they can ladder it up if they need to, or a place that so that they don't have to carry that burden, I think is absolutely powerful. So any other final comments on this one? As you know, we try to move fast at the Bridge Club. So I want to make sure that we're using your time as efficiently as possible. Just give me a second. So let's talk about the profession. For all of the consultants, all of the pharmaceutical companies, the nutrition companies, et cetera, their world has been very different than the practices and what leadership has meant there. For them, the notion has really meant that there's been back orders, and then suddenly there's shifting of goals, and we no longer have conferences, and we're not able to meet our people face to face, and sales reps can't go into practices. I don't know, Dr. Cheryl, have you had sales reps come in at all, or no? Can they not come in anymore? Yep, nope. So the idea is, how are we actually connecting with the profession who are on the front line every single day if we're the ones also supporting the industry? So I'd really love to have some perspectives from our wonderful leaders here. So I'm going to start with Brent. And now I'm going to have you take off your other hat and put back on your CMO hat now, and really share with us what is what is the key change that has happened in leadership on the industry side.
I think it's been this shift from being a vendor to being a partner. I know this is something that we're working on. You know, you mentioned it in the introduction, Catherine, about when we approached you guys, what could we do for the industry? But it's thinking about how to support practices in ways that address their pain points, not our pain points. So even if it doesn't advance our own business, how does it help them? And just really putting on that mindset right now, regardless of whether it leads to any sort of benefit to rural Canin, how do we benefit the practices right now?
And that's been really hard, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, an example is we did offer at the very beginning of confinement, we were hearing a lot about, because everyone was doing curbside, everything was slower, that, we can't even answer the phone. Like the phone never stops ringing in practices. What are we going to do about this? And so we offered 60 days free of telehealth. So we would pay a third-party telehealth company to do teletriage for you, day or night, whatever you wanted. You could kind of choose the options, but basically we'd pay the bill for that for 2 months if you wanted it. And so we had some practices take us up on it, and I think it really did, sort of provide a little bit of breathing room for those practices who did.
Yeah, and then things changed and it got even worse. I mean, I hate to say it, because then everyone started realizing that their pets actually needed to go into the veterinarian. But I actually really want, from Apryl, from your perspective, your company, you're an entrepreneur. I know there are several on here that have relied on those conferences for those face-to-face meetings, for the opportunity for introductions to meet other people. The world really changed from a leadership perspective on the industry side. And so can you talk a little bit about your personal experience with that, and what do you think is going to be the key skill that people can carry forward?
Absolutely. So I think there are, I guess, a couple of things I'd like to bring up real quick. And I guess the first being, lots of our industry partners have expressed kind of the opposite side of what Brent is talking about, because we work with pharmaceutical companies and whatnot too. And their sales reps are beside themselves because they can't get a hold of anyone in the vet's office to sell anything. And I don't have the perfect solution for them by any means, but it's like this yin and yang that everyone's experiencing on either side of things. We as a company have had kind of two major struggles from this. One being that I run a small company, a startup, right? And so we've actually added a lot of staff members through this. And creating, the natural interactions and creating camaraderie in our staff members that have never met each other is very difficult, actually. And so, we've addressed that by encouraging as much offline chat as we can, right? Call each other at home, talk about your kids, talk about your hobbies, form those commonalities, that have coffee by Zoom in the morning, things like that. So you guys can get to know each other. And we have a lot of our staff members that actually will have a drink together on Friday night, for example, now by Zoom, things like that, right? And the other issue has been for us that there aren't conferences, or at least not, the normal conferences where you have those same casual interactions. And so I've really been starting to address that recently. A lot of my, industry contacts, my partners, the people that I tend to interact with mostly at conferences, I've been reaching out to them to set up kind of coffee over Zoom and things like that, just to catch up as well. And so we have to do that to maintain those interactions, because for a company like mine, that's key to keep us moving forward, those large partnerships.
That's really huge. And I am going to pivot really quick before I go to Adrian, because I want Adrian's story. But Brent, you also shared that it's been interesting being in the corporate environment when all of your colleagues are also sheltered in place, but they're in a different continent. So what has that been like with the idea that you're all in your own places, but you're not in the same continent?
Yeah, the time zone thing is a challenge. But it comes down to what April said. It's being intentional about meeting. It's similar to what veterinarians are seeing in practice with every single appointment slot being booked. You got a meeting every 30 minutes or hour, and so it's not, you don't have time to call someone and just check in on them. And if you did, they probably can't answer because their calendar's the same. So it's literally being intentional enough to put something in the calendar that we're going to connect for 15, 30 minutes, whatever it is. And just, there's not really a purpose other than to connect. And that's, that's been what we've started doing. We weren't doing it initially. We just were kind of running and doing the business, but we've had to start doing that as well.
No, I think that's powerful. So one of the things that I love about what Adrian does is he has such an uber look at practices themselves. But one of the things that I think you said is it's really important we remember who we are in this industry. So can you tell us a little bit more about the impact you're seeing on the industry itself and our role within the practices?
There's nothing like a crisis to test you. It really pressure tests all your systems. And for me, as someone who spent their entire career in emergency and specialty, this was a pretty unique challenge. So we saw in February and March this incredible drop in caseload. So it wasn't a long time, but we saw, the American College of Veterinary Surgeons said you shouldn't be doing surgery. But if I'm not doing surgery, that means I'm not paying surgeons. That means I'm not paying surgical techs. I'm not paying the support staff. I'm not paying the overnight hospital care techs who take care of those patients. So as we saw this steep drop in cases, it was actually pretty scary for me as a leader in this industry, because we didn't know what was going to happen next. We sort of know how the story ends, right? Where we saw this drop in caseload and then we saw this surge, but we didn't know this at the time. And so this really became a moment of who we are. I remember going to my BluePearl leadership and said, I'm an operations guy. What do you expect of me in this moment? I'm not seeing enough surgical cases. I'm not seeing enough internal medicine cases. Can I keep my staff, or am I going to face layoffs, just like we were seeing in other practices? And the BluePearl staff came back, the BluePearl leadership came back and said, we're not going to do that. We're going to take care of our people. That's not who we are. And then the Mars family actually came back and then said, that's not who we are. We believe in this associate concept in good times and bad, and we're going to take care of them. And we are in fact not going to lay anybody off because of the coronavirus. And so for me, it was kind of a transformational moment, because truthfully, I'm kind of a skeptical guy. This is corporate medicine. Is this, we believe in the associate concept, but is it going to hold up when times are tough? And the truth is, it did. And I'm really grateful that it did, because we know it surged. And now I'm seeing more cases than I ever have before. And it's really it's really crystallized who we are. We're a provider of last resort. Everybody can shutter their doors. Everybody else can go home. But I've got these emergency doctors, these emergency techs who, if they're not open, if they're not standing, if they're not taking care of cases, then nobody is. And so to me, that's what really leadership in the coronavirus has been about. It's like when so many other people shut their doors, we still saw cases. We still made sure those pets had somewhere to go.
I love that. So I'm going to ask a personal question of all of you to put into the chat, because I really would like, is we're going to ask our guests to answer this question. But I am just curious specifically how this has impacted you all from a perspective of Corona and your leadership skills. How have you been directly impacted by COVID, and what have you done to adjust? Because I think that this is really probably one of the most challenging pieces right now, is really to understand and do introspective. You don't have to go crazy. Like, I'm not asking for you to tell me your life story, but I am curious on being a leader and your people aren't with you. How are you adjusting, or how are you adjusting to those in practice that you're having to lead? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start with Adrian, since you just finished your little wonderful piece there. Give us a little perspective on, you know, really what have you personally been impacted by as a leader?
You know, when I couldn't travel anymore, it really sort of upset my world. So if you think about a 5-day work week, 60% of my time was really spent traveling. I'd get on an airplane, I'd spend a couple of days in the field, I'd travel back. And what I did was I was really thoughtful about where I wanted to use that time. And so for me, it's been this great gift where I've been able to really sort of pour myself into developing leaders. And I decided that I gave all that travel time and I assigned it to developing my leadership team, my front desk managers, my tech managers, my client service managers. So for me, it's been a gift that I was really able to be really thoughtful about where I gave my time and my energy.
What about you, Brent?
Some of it's around kind of giving yourself a break. You know, as I was saying earlier, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it tends to be insidious in a way that you don't realize how it creeps up on you, you know, until, you know, it's there. And so it was stuff like saying, okay, maybe I didn't get as much done as I wanted to today, and it would be easy to keep going into the night because, you know, I'm here, why not? But it's saying, okay, let's just stop for today and we'll pick this back up tomorrow. That's, you know, kind of been the effect I guess I felt most personally.
Apryl, I'm eager on your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, mine was similar, I guess, kind of incorporating both of those. I was saying to you all the other day when we were prepping for this that I took 135 flights in 2019, right? I was traveling that much. I was flying, I was meeting with people, I was all over the place. And then COVID hit and I buckled down and I felt like, oh, I should have spare time now. But really, I just found myself working all the time because there was no longer the gym to go to at night or a dinner to go to on the weekend or anything like that, right? So I just found myself working continuously. And I've really had to take a step back and, you know, say that's a fast track, a fast road to burnout for me, for everyone at my company, if we keep pushing ourselves like that. So we've had to be very conscious about not working too much.
So Cheryl, I am going to have you kind of give perspective on what you just posted in there. I'm aware of that story, but I do think it's powerful for people to understand kind of what you had to do with your practice.
Yeah, so, you know, at the very beginning, of course, when everything started, we didn't know what we were really supposed to do. There wasn't a whole lot of direction from the powers that be. And we were so uncertain. What do we do? Do we start doing curbside? Do we not? Are we even going to be able to be practicing? And we saw, you know, the drop in our caseload, and I saw my team members like not wanting to come to work because they were afraid to come to work. And we're a small practice, you know, we have about 20 people total, but we're a very busy practice usually, and we lost 25% of the team. And, you know, so we had to, you know, within a matter of like 2 weeks, like you guys had said, we put into place all of these things, all these different protocols. You know, we're an AHA practice, so we're used to protocols, but we had to start writing, you know, new protocols. And, you know, we're curbside, and we have to start doing all this extra cleaning stuff. We stopped doing boarding, and, you know, all of my animal technicians, they were transitioned to helping, you know, get animals back and forth from the cars and doing extra cleaning throughout the building. And then we had our first, COVID positive team member. And that was really hard because we were already down, all these team members, and we were doing everything right. We were wearing masks. We were being very careful. We were taking our temperature, but then we have this positive team member, and there wasn't one specific place that I could go to get answers. Like, what do we do now? What do I do now? So thankfully I was able to, just reach out to this, our state, the state of Michigan, and talk to a bunch of people. And we figured out that all we had to do, but it was, of course, many hours of clutch your chest and go, oh, what do we do? Do we have to close down? Am I going to lose more money? Am I not going to be able to pay my people? And all we had to do was just clean the shit out of our practice overnight because we had all been just so safe. And the one team member, of course, was quarantining. We didn't have to get tested, but of course, almost 50% of my team ended up going to get tested, but no one else got it. Everything was cool. But you hear those horror stories of people having to shut down and, that uncertainty. And we've had a few other, along the way. It's been almost 10 months now of this. And we've had some team members, even lately, when the surge has come again, where, their husband is positive. So now they have to stay home. And, or they took their really good friend to a doctor's appointment and they weren't wearing masks. And they found out 2 days later that their friend was positive. So then they have to stay home in quarantine. So it's just all this stuff, but in the middle of everything, just trying to, as a leader, you have to stay positive. You have to empower your team and just trying to be there for them. And when they get worried, just to understand. And if they don't want to come in, say, don't come in, we got you, and everything's going to be fine. So it's been tough.
I do, if
We're
Nicole
getting
feels comfortable, I'd love for Nicole to talk about this zero tolerance policy, because I think that we're in a new age where pet owners, as they leave their homes, need someone to express their feelings on. And unfortunately, the wrong place that they are expressing them are on the people who are loving and caring for our animals. So can you talk a little bit about that, Nicole? I hate to put you on the spot, but when you come to the Bridge Club, be prepared. Someone's going to get called on.
No, it's no problem at all. I think that, so we're an emergency and specialty practice. And so not to say that general practices don't get some heat from clients as well, but we definitely had already had instances where probably I thought we should tell clients they needed to not come back. And no offense, but doctors tend to be a little more forgiving in that arena where they want to give people multiple chances. And we really had kind of a awful client situation early on in COVID with your standard. It's ridiculous that you won't let us in the building. It's, the whole thing. And I was called and I made the call to not consult anybody and said, tell them to leave and not come back ever. And it pretty much went from there. And this go around, I didn't get any pushback from anyone else in our leadership team on really any of the decisions. And I don't, it's really hard for me to look at it as a positive because I don't feel like it's a positive for their pets, but it really has been a positive for our staff. I've fired more clients in the last, since March than I have in my entire 5 years. Well, not even my entire 5 years of working for this practice, in my entire 20 some odd years of being in the veterinary profession. I have definitely fired more clients in the last 10 months than my entire career. And we just don't, part of it is that the treatment got that much worse. It went from just your standard people being upset because of course their patients are, in our case, dying or something else, or it's, stressful situations that they didn't expect. And it's just someone upset and not really calming down to listen and things like that. It went from your standard of those, which are certainly manageable, to, I just really was blown away by the number of people screaming and cursing. And I mean, in the first month, we called the cops 4 times. And that's that's more than, again, ever in my entire life. people that stormed in our doors because initially, until we got some work done, we didn't have a way to lock them from clients, but not lock our staff out as well. So we would have a door propped open because somebody was carrying an emergency in and somebody came barging in. And so it really was, you know, not great. And I literally just had a situation today where it wasn't quite as horrible, but I sent an email to a client saying, you know, this is what happened and it can never happen again. And this was actually a repeat client, but I, you know, basically addressed how she treated one of my CSRs, and I forwarded a copy of it to the CSR, and she thanked me profusely. And that's been the response from our staff every single time, you know, even if it is that we come back. Nobody's excited for the pet, but they feel much more supportive.
But I think you're zoning in on exactly what leadership is for. It's for the people so that they can, in fact, do. And what I think, you know, one of the things that we were having a conversation, we're all in it for the same reason. We don't, our passion for pets has not devolved. It continues to evolve and continues to be the driving factor in everything that we do. And if we can make any decisions, i.e. go back to the elevation, go back to all the words that we've been hearing, and really who are we impacting? And we're impacting those people on the front lines. And I think that that's really critical. And we are coming to our end. So I am going to quickly have each one of our amazing guests tonight tell us literally, if they could, what's the one leadership skill that is good that has come out of COVID. Then we will wrap up with our final toast. So hang on, we're not done yet, but just about. So let's go ahead. Who should start? Let's start with April, because I don't think I've led with April yet. So April, you get to go first.
All right. No, I think that it's really all about the ability to, it goes back to the team building, and it's all about the ability to really build consensus and compromise in our team. Even when we're spread across time zones, we're all, you know, in different locations. And we have limited time on a video chat and we have to make a decision. And so the ability to really build that consensus and really make sure our team is aligned and really in sync has been key.
I love that, because I don't know about you all, but I've noticed I'm far more efficient than I have ever been, but I also waste a lot of time on the back end when I'm not on a call. So it's like, I'm really efficient on a call and I'm not so efficient when I'm not. So maybe everything should change there. Adrian, what is the one skill that has been great from COVID, leadership skill?
I would say it's really all just been about communication, you know, communicating your values and who you are. To speak to what Nicole said so eloquently, you know, we have communicated to our teams that they are more important to us than any client, any patient, any referring veterinarian, because I need you to be with me for the long haul, not only in this moment, but in all the following moments. And so if there is one skill I think that has just stood out, it's communication. Being honest, transparent when people are sick, when you're going to be short, what's going to be, who we are and who we're going to be. I think communication really stands out to me.
I love that. And I happen to know what Brent's going to say. So I think it's a great point to end on before we do our toast. So Brent, tell us, what do you think is the one leadership skill that we should keep because of COVID?
I'm gonna double down on empathy from earlier, and I'm gonna do it with a really short story. As I said earlier, you know, my boss lives in France, my team lives all over, but the critical mass is in France, 7-hour time difference. I was doing my mid-year check-in and my boss said, you know, how are you doing? And I said, fine, everybody's going through stuff, but I'm fine. And he said, I'm really concerned about you. Right now, everybody is an island, but you're doubly an island because you're not connected, not only are you disconnected in geography, but in time. And you should just take the time and connect with people. I don't want you to feel like, you know, you're by yourself. And that, I mean, it just meant he listened. He was empathetic. I didn't know I was giving off that vibe. Clearly I was. And, you know, but he was there to pick it up and then to say something about it. And that meant a lot to me.
I think that's powerful. So I will do this really quick to check in on all of you. If we could do a thumbs up, this or down, how is everyone doing right now? If everyone could just give me a little bit of an idea. because I want you to know that you do have the support if you need it in any way, shape, or form. And if it's not something you feel comfortable sharing here, please feel free to email me and I'll be happy to connect you with someone who might be able to support you in any way, shape, or form, because that's really critically important these days. So before we do our final toast, I do really profusely want to thank Royal Canin for actually thinking ahead and saying, what can we do to give back to this profession? And this is one of those things, having really candid discussions about the reality of what we are all facing. So huge thank you to them. Thank you to Brent. Thank you to Adrian and Apryl. They have provided incredible insights. But let's keep the conversation going. If you guys have more questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat or email me or go to our Facebook page. Happy to continue this conversation. It's an important one. We're all in this together, if you will. So with that, I'm now going to give it to, they were flipping a coin. Who gets to do this? And Apryl ended up winning, calling it a win. Who gets to do the closing toast?
For those of you that I've met before, you know, Scotland is special to me. I did my residency there. And so the great Scottish poet way back in the 18th century, Robbie Burns, he wrote something that's very fitting for us right now. And he said, there is no such uncertainty as a sure thing. And I think that fits 2020 perfectly. So to 2020, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.